Welcome and thank you for joining me here once again on Film Pro Productivity. Each week I introduce concepts that film professionals and other creatives can use to make life easier and avoid creative burnout. I also present time management and lifestyle hacks for a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 22, How to Quit Ruminating. On this week's show, I'll be talking all about rumination. I mentioned it in passing on the Inner Critic episode, I think that was episode 6, but I'll be expanding on it here and offering you some solutions. Rumination can take over your mind, kill your creativity, bring you down, make you paranoid, and kill your love for life. It's a nasty, nasty piece of work. Before I go on to that though, let's talk about last week's episode, procrastination. It's something most of us have a bit of a problem with, so I hope that you found the episode useful. If you checked it out, how did you get on with the call to action? Have you applied some of the solutions to your life and work? And if so, how has that worked out for you? Remember that you can always get in touch via Twitter at FilmProProdPod or on Facebook at FilmProProductivity or on the official website at filmproproductivity.com/contact. The more adventurous amongst you might even want to use the SpeakPipe service, which is on the contact page, and leave me a voicemail. I genuinely love hearing from listeners like that, so please do check it out. And if you really have to procrastinate, make sure that you do so by listening to my podcast. At least then you'll be moving forward in your productivity skills. As I said a minute ago, today's show is all about a rather nasty, creativity-killing, negativity-forming, stress, anxiety and paranoia-inducing ailment called rumination. The Cambridge Dictionary describes rumination simply as the act of carefully thinking and for a long period about something. But that doesn't even go halfway towards describing the negative aspects of it. Healthline.com hits far nearer the mark. It says, the process of continuously thinking about the same thoughts, which tend to be sad or dark, is called rumination. A habit of rumination can be dangerous to your mental health, as it can prolong or intensify depression as well as impair your ability to think and process emotions. It may also cause you to feel isolated and can, in reality, push people away. This starts to give you an idea of just how dangerous rumination is for the soul. If your head has ever been filled with one single thought or a string of thoughts or even a memory of something you just can't change that keeps repeating and repeating and repeating itself, then you have suffered or are still suffering from rumination. To me, and I haven't had it in a long time, I'm relieved to say, rumination is the nagging, incessant part of your subconscious that replays your failures and what-ifs and only focuses on the negative. It's not so much a voice like the negative inner voice or inner critic that I talked about in episode 6. It's more likely to manifest itself as thoughts, emotions or resentments that keep looping in your mind and will keep you awake at night. Typically, we ruminate about the past, including perceived mistakes and missed opportunities. I say perceived quite deliberately there, as some people find themselves ruminating over nothing at all. It's an incessant repetition of a problem without resolution and is common in those who suffer anxiety and depression, as these conditions cause our brains to become less flexible and able to deal with problems. Rumination makes us rethink again and again and again and again what we should have said or done and keeps kicking us when we're down long after we can do anything to change it. It replays the unfair treatment, real or imagined, we have received by others, by the government, by our employers or friends or family. Things that most of the time we can't change anyway, especially in the wee small hours of the morning when these looped thoughts take root. Rumination is born of our bad experiences, and it won't let you forget them. I've used this analogy before, but it's very relevant here. I was once stopped by the cops for using a mobile phone whilst driving. Trouble was, it wasn't true. I was driving along minding my own business and I got pulled over. These two cops would neither look at my phone, which would have disproved their accusation, nor search my car for another phone, which they had suggested I had hidden when I was so insistent that they look at my phone. For 10 months I had to hang around waiting for this to go to trial. The way that it works in the UK, you have to actually go to court twice. Once to see if you've changed your mind, which is totally infuriating, and once for the supposed trial. I lost the job of fight director on and I'm not 100% sure on this, I think it was Case Histories, a big Jason Isaacs drama, because of these idiots that had made up a story to meet their quota, as both dates I was booked for fights on the job fell on exactly the 2 court days that I had to attend. I played that incident over in my head 10,000 times or more over the 10 months, getting more and more angry. But do you know what? I stood up in court and I won the case. Even now, although I am perfectly happy with my life and position though, I feel the fear of the time I was angry for 10 months. And it's the fault of rumination for ensuring that I'll never forget it. But don't panic, folks. That small damage is left within me. You can probably hear it in my voice. And I live with it, but it's no big deal. A destruction of my trust and a clouding of my outlook, certainly, but for the large part, I got over it and all is well. Peter Kinderman says that rumination tends to be eased if we learn to be mindful and if we are able to be aware of and understand how our own thoughts work. And it's with that mindfulness that I live quite happily now. Let's look more closely at what it is, why we do it, and some solutions. Professor of Psychology Sonia Lyburmirskyl explains that the combination of rumination and negative mood is toxic. Research shows that people who ruminate while sad or distraught are likely to feel besieged, powerless, self-critical, pessimistic, and generally negatively biased. In an article in Psych Central, and I'll link to all the sources for all these references in the show notes, we discover that ruminating as a thing is characterised by overwhelming self-criticism and negative self-talk about one's failures and shortcomings, unquote. We think that if we'd just done something better or had been better, the outcome would have been more positive. It's also characterised by black and white, all or nothing catastrophic thinking, which is referred to as catastrophising, by the way, and if you don't do it yourself, I bet you know someone that does. When we ruminate, we think things like, why me? Why does this always happen? Or why did he or she say that? Now, the research on rumination is really quite prolific, but it's not something I think I've ever heard anyone talk about. And since we know what rumination is now, for me, the bigger question is, why do we do it? Well, according to the American Psychological Association, we ruminate for a variety of reasons, including having a history of emotional or physical trauma. That sounds like that was the root of my problem when I had it. Belief that by doing so, you'll gain insight into your life or a problem. Next, facing ongoing stressors that can't be controlled. For listeners for whom English is a second language, a stressor is a noun, which means something that causes a state of strain or tension. Basically, it's something that causes you stress. So just to recap on that one, the third that they list is facing ongoing stressors that can't be controlled. It goes on to say that rumination is also common in those who possess certain personality characteristics, which include perfectionism, neuroticism, and those who have an excessive focus on one's relationships with others. These individuals might be consumed by what others think. The article in Psych Central suggests a few other reasons why rumination might manifest itself. According to the Psychology of Success blog that it quotes, it's just human nature to ruminate. Our brains, which evolved over millions of years, pay attention to danger. They tend towards negative thinking for the sake of survival. Back then, if we failed to detect threats like a predator, a natural hazard, or some other kind of aggression, it could cost us our lives and the chance of passing on our genes. As such, our brains, thoughts, and beliefs are wired to detect and attend to negative experiences instead of positive ones. It next suggests that rumination may be common in individuals who have low self-worth. These people use absolutes like nobody will hire me, or nobody likes me, or I have to do everything, instead of searching for productive solutions to their issues. People who are depressed and anxious tend to show this pattern of thinking more often. Research has shown a connection between rumination and depression. Rumination dampens problem solving and keeps people trapped in a depressive state. People who ruminate don't have much confidence in their solutions, so they aren't proactive about alleviating their pain. Plus, rumination often pushes people away, further feeding the depression. I saw a quote when I was researching this by a CEO called David Sikhosana. He said that overthinking is best known as creating problems that are never there. And that's a big part of problem that ruminators face, I think. The rumination of things that don't really matter breeds paranoia for problems that just don't exist. Now, some people might say, of course, well, what's so bad about rumination? It's all about problem solving, isn't it? Well, Psychology Today answers that one. It says that while it's true that problem solving and planning are essential to overcoming a difficult problem, people who ruminate tend to take these activities too far and for too long. It goes on to say that people who ruminate will often spend hours analysing the situation even after they've developed a plan for dealing with it. Sometimes people will ruminate about a problem so much that they never develop a solution to the problem. This is where rumination becomes really problematic. If the situation has you in a bad mood, rumination will keep that bad mood alive and you will feel upset for as long as you ruminate. And if you ruminate on the problem for days, chances are you'll remain upset for days. In my own analogy, in fact, remember, I was angry for 10 months and probably still suffered for maybe another year after that before I finally settled. That definitely had an impact on my life. And the research on all of this is extremely consistent. People who ruminate are much more likely to develop problems with depression and anxiety. Rumination is also connected to many different forms of self-sabotage. For example, if you ruminate on something upsetting a friend did, it's going to take longer to forgive that friend and get back to enjoying time with them. If you hold a grudge and constantly ruminate on what that friend did or is perceived to have done, even if they are innocent, you will forever destroy that friendship. Now that we know what it is and why it happens, let's talk about some solutions to the problem. Number one for me, the surefire best way to beat it is to try and distract yourself. That goes really for any worry you might have at all, whether it's a relative in hospital or the loss of a relationship or just generally being down. If you start to ruminate and you recognise it, which is part of the solution by the way, find a distraction to break your thought cycle. Call a friend or do a household task, preferably something a bit more engaging. Maybe watch a film or read a book, that worked for me. I've got the ultimate distraction now and that's my dog Angus. If I did catch myself ruminating, I'm certain that just walking the dog would go a long ways to improving my mindset. Next, stop your train of thought. Think or even tell yourself stop or no when you start to ruminate. You can even utilise my higher level thinking strategy to manoeuvre yourself out of trouble. Try putting your repetitive thoughts in perspective. Writing it down will help this. When it's out of your mind, you may just realise that the problem is not important at all and you might be able to let it go. Third up, another technique might be to take this further. Plan and then take action on it. You could, instead of repeating the same negative thought over and over again, take that thought and make a plan to take action to address it. Once you've got an outlined plan of action, take one small step to address the issue. Doing this will disrupt the pattern of rumination. And if perfectionism and goal setting has led you to rumination with goals that are unrealistic, you might have to just revisit them and make alterations. Setting more realistic goals can reduce the risks of overthinking your own actions. I scheduled a load of stuff to happen at the same time as I was working on this podcast, and the jumping around slowed me down and almost ground me to a halt. That was solved very quickly when I took my own advice from the multitasking episode and I simplified my schedule. Now I'm only working on the podcast for a few weeks and I've moved my other goal-orientated tasks till after the 24th of February when this launches. I'm zooming through my podcast stuff now as a result of that. An article I read in Psychology Today, which is my starting point for this solutions section we're in now, suggests that having many sources of self-esteem is important for keeping you in a better mood and reducing your risks of rumination. The more sources of self-esteem that you have, the smaller the risk that you will fixate on your perceived shortcomings. The self-esteem that I have come to understand they're talking about here, by the way, is just treating yourself with respect and taking good care of your health, your development, and your environment. If you're open to growth experiences in meaningful relationships, tolerant of risk, quick to joy and delight, and accepting and forgiving of yourself and others, then your self-esteem will strengthen. Next, you could try meditation. It can reduce rumination because it involves clearing your mind to arrive at an emotionally calm state. When you find yourself with a repeating loop of thoughts in your mind, seek out a quiet place, sit down, breathe deeply and focus on nothing but breathing. If you think it's a bit mental or you're uncomfortable, then check out the app called Meetups, or you may have luck on Craigslist or Gumtree and find a group nearby that you can learn with. Meditation is actually really big these days, and you won't have to look that far to find others that practice it. Try udemy.com for video courses on the topic if you prefer to learn alone. Next on my list of solutions is to talk to a friend. Ruminating can make you feel isolated. Talking about your thoughts to a friend with an outside perspective might help you to break the cycle. But please make sure you pick someone that won't simply ruminate along with you. Oh, and try to stay off social media. Releasing your woes there might make you feel good in the short term, but you'll get dragged down by it if you don't get the responses that you hope for. You may get a bit of interaction at first, but over time, people will switch off to you and you'll feel even more isolated. Talk to someone, find a real human, and interact. If you really need it, why don't you try therapy? A therapist can help you identify why you're ruminating and how to address the problems that are at their core. And if you feel that somehow therapy is going a bit over the top, then get over it. Therapy exists for a reason, and if you've tried what feels like everything else, then it's got to be worth a shot. And it's not half as expensive as you think it's going to be either, so stop putting obstacles in your way and pick up the phone or send an email. It's a good way to sort out the problem. Finally, and this is one that really worked well for me, schedule time to worry. What I mean is, like, put it in your diary. Put in 10 minutes at a specific time of day, 15 minutes if it's a particularly big problem, and allow yourself to worry only during that period. This simple psychological trickery really works. You give yourself permission to worry at that point, and then you're able to let go far more easily at all other times. It's a wee bit hippy-dippy, you might think, but it really works. So there are a few good solutions for you. I hope that they'll help you out if you believe yourself to be a ruminator. And if you want to bring an end to your repetitive negative thoughts, here are some other changes you can make to your life to help yourself out. 1. Be proactive. Use that higher level thinking self that I talked about right from episode 1 to identify the problems in your life and start taking actions to solve them, one step at a time. 2. Set your own expectations. Constantly work on building your self-esteem by taking care of yourself and doing things you enjoy and excel at. And 3. Create a support system. Having friends and family members and maybe even a therapist will distract you from your ruminating thoughts and will boost your self-esteem. I want you to realise that it is absolutely possible to stop ruminating. It starts with high-level thinking, the practice of working on your life and career at the same time that you find yourself living and working in it. So each time you find yourself ruminating, make a mental note of the situation you're in. This includes where you are, what time of day it is, who's round about you, if anyone at all, and what you've been doing that day. Developing ways to avoid or manage these triggers can reduce your rumination and allow you to take back control. A lot of what I've presented here has been from psychology journals, tempered by my own experience, but I'll just chuck in here a thought or two further on the matter as we finish. Firstly, I'd like to reiterate that you should avoid black and white thinking. If something has gone wrong or you made a mistake, it doesn't mean that your whole life is doomed. Cut yourself some slack and teach yourself to realise that black and white thinking just isn't reality. And remember that when you're feeling low, that it's easy to get caught up in believing that bad things are happening because of you. Don't allow yourself to believe that you're the victim. Having a victim mentality will not lift you up. It will entomb you in your fears and enslave you to things like rumination. I'll end with the words of author Colleen McCarty. She writes, "I'm tired of being inside my head. I want to live out here, with you." Your call to action this week is, if you have a problem with rumination or you think you know someone that does, to tackle it head on using the advice that I've offered here today. And if you don't, then revisit the advice I gave you in episode 4, the 5 a day for good mental health system with the acronym ALIVE. So stay active, observe the world about you, interact with others, help others, and keep learning new things. It's all good for your mental health. I realise that this episode is not a particularly film pro one at all, but it's something that everyone might suffer from time to time, and I hope that it's been useful for you. I don't choose these topics lightly, and I think this one's important. Next week's episode is called Killing the Microwave Mentality, and it's one of those mind-expanding concept episodes, so I think you're going to like it. Thanks again for giving me your time and choosing to spend it here with me. Until next week, please take control of your own destiny, keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity. The music that you're listening to right now is Adventures by Ihumitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com. Please follow my personal account on Twitter and Instagram at fight_director, or follow the show on Twitter at filmproprodpod or on Facebook at filmproproductivity. Thanks again for supporting the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review.